Hey, this is Devin from Lionheart Catholic. Wanted to share with you today 4 different secret ingredients of the saints that will help you during this crisis. Okay, so in my book, Lionheart Catholic, I share stories from my own life where I discovered what I call the ingredients in the secret recipe of the saints. None of these should actually be secret. I want all Catholics to know them, and all Catholics used to know them. So I'm going to share them with you now. Number 1, detachment. So what is detachment? It's actually not being attached to the things of this world, not being inordinately attached to fame or money or wealth or health or happiness or anything else. I was close to losing everything about 5 years ago when I was sued. And I was sued, in my view, unjustly, but I learned that it doesn't matter whether it's just or unjust. Anyone can sue you for anything, and you have to defend yourself, and you have to pay your lawyers $300 an hour, $400 an hour. We ended up going to arbitration. Well, now you're actually having to split the cost of the arbiter, and that person made $700 an hour. So our share was $350. That's even before the case goes to trial or is decided by the arbitration. There's discovery phase and there's depositions. There's all sorts of stuff. Well, I was watching as my money was doing this, just paying our own lawyers, let alone if the people suing us won, in which case we might have to pay damages. They might win everything. We were going to go bankrupt. Suddenly, everything I'd worked for was liable to be taken away, and it made me feel panicked. You might be feeling panicked right now with this crisis, and detachment was something I learned from the saints. When you look at the lives of the saints, they gave up all worldly benefits. Some had money, they gave that up. Some had titles, they gave that up. And instead they said, you know what, you can take everything away from me, but you can't take away my relationship to God. You can't take away the love that I have in my heart. And so I learned that. So number 1, detachment during this time. You can start to practice that. When you think, what's the worst that could happen? Well, I die. Okay, and I lose everything. I lose my health. I lose everything. Well, okay. Then you'll meet our Lord face to face. And if you die in his friendship, you'll go to heaven. So there's worse things to happen. The worst thing to happen is to die outside of God's friendship in mortal sin and go to hell. That's the thing we should be really fearful of. Okay, so second one is trust in God through trials. Okay, so this is when we're going through trial, placing our trust in our Lord, no matter what. And for me, I ran into this we actually tried to become farmers. We got real enamored of the back to the land movement and sustainable agriculture. We had a farm. I had grass-fed cows that I was rotationally grazing around, bees, chickens, everything. Well, I herniated 2 discs in my back, actually ruptured them, so all the fluid is leaking out. I was in severe pain, could barely do my full-time job, which is software development. And once again, I was faced with, I'm not going to be able to provide for my family, which for a husband and father is one of the most frightening things that we can face. I started learning about the saints, learned about Saint Rita. Well, Saint Rita had a husband who was abusive. He was involved in a blood feud in Italy during that time. She had 2 sons. Well, her husband was ultimately killed by his rivals. And then her sons were pulled in to that blood feud by their uncle. They both died. And so St. Rita lost everything. She then actually applied to become a nun, and her application was rejected because there were nuns in the convent who were part of that rival faction that had killed her husband. Eventually, she actually gained admittance into that, and in Cascia, Italy, where she was from, she worked for peace and reconciliation. So St. Rita, throughout her whole life, trusted in God despite the trials that she faced. And ultimately, God gave her the stigmata, the wounds of Christ. I believe one was it was on her forehead. Okay, so next secret, the third secret is releasing control, doing your best with the situation, and leaving the results in God's hands. Okay, and I faced this with our daughter when she was 4. She was diagnosed with leukemia. This was a total shock. We went in for just a bump on her face. Well, it turns out it was cancer, and it was leukemia, and it was starting to spread. During that time, we realized how powerless, how outside of our control this was. We could only do our best to try to keep her as healthy as she could be as she's getting chemo, right, which is very poisonous. You're kind of fighting fire with fire when you're doing chemo. But it was the only game in town. And through that, we realized we're going to do our best. We're going to try to help her. But ultimately, after we've done that, whatever happens is in God's hands. He's the one who's the author of life. He's the one who's in charge, not us. And as much as I want to protect my daughter, right, one of the roles of the father is to protect his children. I can't protect her from leukemia, something like that. And that's what the saints learned too. St. Louis, King of France, had a motto: anything but a mortal sin. He said, what I can control is what me and my family do. If we don't commit a mortal sin, instead follow God, Christ and his church, then we're going to be eternally successful. All right, so that was the third secret ingredient: releasing control, doing your best, and leaving the results in God's hands. And that's what we have to do during this time. You can't control a virus. You can't control what people do. You might get this virus. You can't control what's going to happen. You can do your best to take vitamins and be healthy. But at the end of the day, you don't know how it's going to go, right? You trust and release that control to God. All right, fourth ingredient will help you during this crisis is happiness in the next life. This might seem kind of morbid, but it's really not. It's just reality. Saint Bernadette, right, in France, 170 years ago, Our Lady of Lourdes appeared to her, simple French peasant girl. And among the many things she said to Saint Bernadette, one was, I can't promise you happiness in this life, but only in the one to come. Meaning, I can promise you happiness in heaven. This life, though, it's going to be a valley of tears. And it was for St. Bernadette. She was ridiculed. People said, no, you didn't see Our Lady. You're making stuff up. Initially, she was disbelieved by her family, by the town, by the priest, by the bishop, everyone. And eventually, of course, they realized it was true because Our Lady worked miraculous signs there. But eventually, St. Bernadette went to a convent, and the nuns there didn't treat her very well. The Mother Superior and the bishop were like, this nun's pretty worthless. Give her just some simple job, which St. Bernadette humbly accepted. And then she died in her mid-30s. She got tuberculosis, like in her knee. She'd had health problems her whole life, like asthma and such. And she died at 36 from a painful death. She'd been suffering terribly, but she didn't let on because she offered her life to God. She knew, following Our Lady's words, that it was in the next life that she would be happy, not in this life. And yes, we want to make this life as good as we can, right? None of us want to have a terrible life or one that's filled with pain. But at the end of the day, when we've done our best, right, we know that this is not where we're going to find ultimate happiness or rest or ultimate peace, except in our Lord's will. So if this sounds interesting to you, my book, Lionheart Catholic, How to Become a Saint in These Dark Times, and they're very dark. This is a guidebook to the recipe of the saints, and I actually got 20 different ingredients. I'm offering this book at cost, the cost of printing and shipping it to you, which is $7.95. The cost has been going up, but I've kept it the same, $7.95. Also, if you already think you're a Lionheart Catholic, I got a quiz for you. Take it down below, 10 questions. Let's see how up to snuff you are. So this is Devin Rose, Lionheart Catholic. Lionheart Catholics renew the church and transform the world by becoming saints. If that's what you're about, take the quiz, get the book. Let's see how you do.